Hey everybody, I'm Dan Murrell here with my review of Godzilla, King of the Monsters, the sequel to 2014's Americanized reboot of the decades-long love affair we've all had with everyone's favorite lizard, Godzilla. Now this one is not from director Gareth Edwards, who directed 2014's version. This is from director Michael Dougherty, who you might know as the director of films like Krampus and Trick or Treat. The cast includes Kyle Chandler, Vera Farmiga, Millie Bobby Brown, Ken Watanabe, Ziyi Zhang, but let's be honest, everyone's putting their money down for the monsters. Godzilla, of course, being the biggest among them, also including classic Godzilla characters who were held back from the last film, including Mothra, Rodan, and King Ghidorah. The fights in this film, as you can imagine, just from the trailers and everything else, are bigger and louder and more consistently peppered throughout the film than in the last movie, which was a lot of people's complaints about the last film. The 2014 version of Godzilla, I will admit, is a very odd film. It was marketed around Bryan Cranston, who disappeared early on in the movie. Godzilla himself was teased throughout the film, but not really used in a big way until the third act, and that turned a lot of people off. A lot of people just were not fans of the film for that reason. And when I'm thinking about my own thoughts about Godzilla, King of the Monsters, and trying to make a recommendation to you watching, I think a lot of it ties into what you thought and what I thought of the 2014 Godzilla and why you liked it or didn't like it. And I think that is largely going to drive a lot of your opinions about Godzilla, King of the Monsters, because there's no doubt that Godzilla, King of the Monsters is much more of the straightforward, big monster fighting action film that a lot of people probably expected from 2014's Godzilla. And it's completely fine and understandable if you walked into that film thinking that that's what you were going to get. I was a fan of 2014's Godzilla mainly because they didn't fall into those traps. I liked the fact that they teased Godzilla throughout the film and would have a build-up and you'd think that you were going to see something and then they would pull back. It made the third act of that film and the eventual big action sequence that capped it off more special for me because I was in anticipation. I wanted it. The movie made me earn that fight. I also liked the way that Gareth Edwards played with the presentation of Godzilla, with his scale. A lot of people didn't like that so much of the film was centered around Aaron Taylor Johnson. I thought that that was a cool approach to the monster, to use something as big as Godzilla but scale it in the eyes of one people or a few people, often from the ground or the halo jump through different perspectives, to really sell the scale and the epic size of what was going on. Godzilla, King of the Monsters, in a lot of ways, is the payoff of 2014's film, spread out across an entire film. But what it didn't have were anything really other than the monster fights. I feel like your enjoyment of Godzilla, King of the Monsters is going to depend almost exclusively on what you think of Mothra and King Ghidorah, Rodan, and Godzilla. Now, if you're a fan of Godzilla, of the movies, of the franchise over the years, I think you're probably going to love this movie because you get so much of these monsters come to life, fighting each other, or maybe even teaming up, switching sides, switching allegiances. Who knows who's going to fight when or where or why? That's a lot of the movie is driven by that. However, I would say that more than you might expect of the movie is also driven by the human characters. And I can't fault the performances of anyone in the movie. Kyle Chandler and Bradley Whitford in particular are very aware of what movie they're in, of what the tone is, at least for the first 30 minutes of the film. But as the film keeps going, it adopts a much more serious demeanor. We fall into another version of the cliched, and we've mentioned this in Honest Trailers and elsewhere, plot of mankind is the real virus, humanity is the enemy. That kind of trope that has driven so many movies over the last 5 years or so, it's becoming the go-to motivational thing or explanation for anything related to nature or aliens or anything you can imagine that's otherworldly. And it felt tired to me. When the movie started taking a turn into that, when it moved away from understanding that the audience is really here to see the monsters fight, and started to construct this plot that I thought was based on cliche after cliche and trope after trope, that's when the movie started to lose a lot of my interest. And that's why my recommendation really had to fall on the fights throughout the film, the conflicts between Godzilla and the monsters, and they look really cool. I don't begrudge anyone that comes out of this movie having just sat back for 2 hours and eaten a whole tub of popcorn and just enjoying the monster on monster action that's happening on screen. I completely understand that. However, another thing that I liked about the last Godzilla film was the way that it had some unique elements to the fight. I think because it was so limited, they had a chance to really scale down and figure out beat by beat what are these showdowns going to look like and exploit that. When you have all these mouths to feed, both with characters and with the different creatures that keep popping up, I felt like a lot of the fights just ended up being the same big monster clash over and over again and lost a little bit of their luster as the film went on. So when I look back at Godzilla King of the Monsters as a whole, in my mind, it's not quite enough for me to recommend. It's not a terrible film by any stretch of the imagination. It's very entertaining throughout a lot of it. But I felt like it lost some of its pop and lost some of its luster as the film went on and just kept throwing monsters at each other. But I don't expect that opinion to be universal. As a matter of fact, I think there's probably a majority of people watching this review that are going to go and have a great time and enjoy this movie. And I'm glad. I'm glad that it worked for you. I wish it had worked better for me, but ultimately Godzilla King of the Monsters didn't quite do it for me, although it's very close. I'm almost that close to recommending it just based on the action and everything. There's obviously a lot of heart and love that went into making this film. It didn't quite do it for me, but I think it's very likely that you will have a different opinion. So that's my thoughts on Godzilla King of the Monsters. When you see the movie, what did you think of it? Let me know in the comments below. I'd always love to hear from you. And as always, stay tuned. Here on Fandom Entertainment, we'll be reviewing the latest movies to hit the theaters every week. Till next time, I'm Dan Murrell. Thanks for watching.